An empty chair was set at my stepson's engagement to honor my memory. But I was alive. Public records listed me as deceased while my stepson prepared to celebrate in a house I still legally owned. In the next few minutes, I'll explain how I was erased on paper and how I showed up with legal proof no one expected. Before the full story begins, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. It helps stories like this reach the people who need them. At 73, mornings come quietly. No rush, no deadlines. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the slow ritual of coffee poured too strong for anyone else's taste. That morning felt no different until my name disappeared. The engagement registry page loaded slowly on my old laptop. My stepson, Daniel Marcus Cole. Age listed, employment listed, address listed, and under next of kin, one line sat where my name should have been. Status, deceased. I refreshed the page once. Then again, same word, cold, final, like a door closed without a sound. At first, I assumed a mistake. A form autofilled wrong. A checkbox hit by accident. But when I scrolled further, my stomach tightened. The engagement date was scheduled for late summer. The venue listed wasn't a banquet hall or hotel. It was Hawthorne Ridge Estate. My house, not the apartment I lived in now. The house I bought after my wife passed. The one I partially signed over Daniel years ago when he promised to renovate it, live there, raise a family. The one I still paid taxes on. The one still legally mine. Under the ceremony notes, a sentence stood out, polite and rehearsed. In loving memory of Arthur Cole, a chair will be reserved. A memory, a chair, for a man still breathing. I sat back, fingers numb, rain ticking against the window like it had somewhere important to be. Time kept moving, even if I'd apparently stopped existing. Daniel wasn't my biological son. I met him when he was 9, all elbows and questions, suspicious of the man dating his mother. Over time, suspicion turned into routine. Routine into something that felt close enough to family. I helped with homework, patched scraped knees, paid for textbooks, signed permission slips. I never tried to replace his father. I just stayed. When his mother died, I stayed then too. So seeing myself legally erased didn't hurt all at once. It came in layers. First confusion, then disbelief, then a slow, spreading understanding that this was an error. This was intentional. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. A filed affidavit claiming I'd passed years earlier. A transfer request submitted under estate consolidation. A signature on a property document that looked like mine, but wasn't. Someone had studied my handwriting, practiced it, used it. I opened the drawer beside the sink and pulled out an old photograph. Daniel at 12, holding a fishing rod too big for him. Me behind him, sunburned, smiling without thinking. Proof of existence, suddenly necessary. I didn't cry. I wrote. Just facts. No emotion. No questions yet. Declared deceased. Property still in my name. Engagement planned at Hawthorne Ridge. By nightfall, the truth was heavier than anger. It wasn't just that Daniel wanted the house. It was that he wanted me gone quietly, erased without confrontation. A memory instead of a man who could say no. Sleep came easily that night. Calm has a way of settling in when decisions are made. The next morning, I opened a new folder on my computer, buried it inside another folder labeled Utilities. Inside that, another named Recipes. No one looks there. Inside went screenshots, documents, timestamps. A record began to form. By noon, I made a call. Margaret Doyle answered on the second ring. A voice like sandpaper and certainty. I need to confirm I'm alive, I said. Silence, then a low chuckle. Coffee or something stronger? Coffee, I replied. This needs a clear head. We met that afternoon. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She read. She nodded. She underlined. This isn't negligence, she said finally. This is fraud. The word didn't scare me. It clarified things. She explained the steps. Affidavits. Handwriting verification. Immediate notice to freeze property use. Quiet, precise actions. No shouting. No warnings. An engagement? I asked. Margaret closed the folder. Let it happen. Let them invite people into the lie. I nodded. That sounded right. Back home, I labeled a flash drive, spice blends, and transferred every file. Slid it into my coat pocket. Evidence shouldn't look important. That evening, Daniel's name flashed on my phone. One ring, then silence. I didn't return the call. Some conversations end before they're spoken. By the end of the week, official records had begun to shift. My name no longer showed as deceased in one system. Still did in another. Lies unravel slowly when paperwork is involved. The engagement day approached. Hawthorne Ridge filled with lights and linen. Invitations went out. A chair waited for a man who was supposedly gone, and I prepared to attend. Not as a guest, not as a memory, but as proof. The days leading up to the engagement moved with a strange precision. Everything slowed, yet every detail sharpened. Sounds lingered longer. Thoughts finished themselves. At 73, patience is no longer something learned. It's something earned. And patience, I discovered, was my sharpest tool. Mornings were spent gathering proof. Afternoons were for silence. Evenings were for remembering, not out of sentiment, but context. Memory, when organized, becomes evidence. The next document Margaret uncovered arrived by secure email late one night. A scanned declaration attached to a mortgage adjustment request. One page. Clean margins. Calm language. Signed by Rebecca Sloan, Daniel's fiancée. The letter stated, politely, that Arthur Cole had passed several years earlier due to cardiac failure. It thanked the institution for understanding as the family moved forward. Family. That word sat heavy. I printed the page and read it slowly. There was no cruelty in it. No malice. Just certainty. The kind that only exists when someone has decided a version of reality is easier than the truth. Margaret called an hour later. This letter unlocked everything, she said. They used it to justify a second lien. Once the bank believed you were gone, the rest followed. The lie had legs. It had walked into offices, been nodded at, stamped, filed. I want to know who knew, I said. You will, she replied. But first, we make sure no one can pretend ignorance. The next step was quiet but effective. A legal notice sent directly to the venue's administrative office. Not a threat, just a fact. Ownership dispute. Active investigation. Property use suspended pending resolution. No accusations. No emotion. Just gravity. I imagined Hawthorne Ridge the day that email arrived. A cheerful assistant opening an inbox between vendor confirmations. Reading the notice once. Then again. The way tone drains from a room. Without warning. I didn't need to be there to feel it. Daniel never called again. Silence, when deliberate, becomes a language of its own. 2 days later, a message arrived from someone named Evan Hartley. Best friend. A name I recognized from years ago. High school. Late nights. Someone Daniel once trusted enough to talk freely around. The message was short. I don't know if this is real, but if it is, I'm sorry. No questions. No defense. Just confusion. I didn't reply. Explanations were coming soon enough. On the morning before the engagement, Margaret and I reviewed everything one last time. She laid the documents out in order, like cards in a deck, each one stronger than the last. Affidavit confirming my identity. Handwriting analysis. County correction notice. Property freeze order. Copy of Rebecca's letter. This stays sealed unless needed, she said, tapping the folder. But it will be needed. What if they back out? I asked. Then the truth still exists, she said. And so do you. That night, sleep came easily. Calm had settled in fully now. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just readiness. The morning of the engagement arrived clear and cool. No dramatic skies. No storms. Just a quiet certainty in the air, like the world knew something was about to be corrected. I dressed carefully. Navy coat. Clean shirt. Shoes polished but practical. Age teaches you the difference between dressing to impress and dressing to endure. The flash drive went into my inside pocket. the folder into my bag. Margaret would meet me there. As I locked my apartment door, I paused, not out of fear, out of acknowledgement. Whatever happened next, something would end. The drive to Hawthorne Ridge was short. Familiar roads, familiar turns. A house remembered from a different life rose ahead, draped now in fabric and expectation. Cars lined the gravel drive. Laughter floated through open windows. Glasses clinked. A celebration unfolding atop borrowed certainty. No one noticed me at first. That's the thing about erasure. You learn how invisible people expect you to be. I walked past the garden where I once planted trees, past the stone path I paid to have laid, toward the patio where guests gathered, dressed in light colors, unaware they were standing inside a contradiction. Margaret joined me near the edge of the crowd. Calm, prepared, unmoved. "We wait," she said quietly. Then Daniel appeared. He stepped out from the house smiling, tie loosened, confidence rehearsed. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe thinner, or maybe the lie had weighed after all. His smile faded slowly, not with shock, with recognition. The moment stretched. People sensed it. Conversations dipped. Eyes followed his gaze. He walked toward me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. No anger, just panic disguised as irritation. "I was invited," I replied evenly, in memory. Margaret stepped forward then, handing him the envelope. "Notice of dispute," she said. Effective immediately. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. He read, skipped, went back. Color drained from his face. Rebecca appeared behind him. Confusion first, then fear. "You said," she began. I looked at her then. Not accusing, not gentle, just present. "I was never gone," I said. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was heavy, the kind that makes people look down at their shoes. Margaret spoke next, her voice carrying without effort. "This property cannot be used for any event until ownership is resolved. All proceedings connected to it are suspended." Someone near the bar whispered. Someone else stepped back. The truth doesn't shout. It spreads. Rebecca dropped her bouquet. Daniel didn't speak again. I turned away before anything else could be said. Not out of mercy. Out of completion. As we walked back down the path, I heard murmurs behind us. Not outrage. Not chaos. Just recalibration. Outside the gates, Margaret unlocked her car. "That's it," she said. I nodded. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was balance. Something set back where it belonged. Later, alone again, I sat at my kitchen table and made tea. The apartment felt different. Not warmer. Not brighter. Just honest. I opened my notebook and wrote one line. Erasure fails when the living refuse to disappear. The world moved on. Slowly. Correctly. And so did I. The silence after the engagement wasn't immediate. It took shape slowly, like dust settling after something heavy hits the ground. Phones buzzed. Messages half-written were never sent. People recalculated their roles in a story that had shifted beneath their feet. I didn't hear any of it directly. That was the point. The drive home felt longer than it had that morning, not because of traffic, but because the adrenaline had burned off, leaving behind a clean, hollow space. Margaret dropped me off without ceremony. No handshake. No congratulations. "You did what you came to do," she said. "Now let the law finish the sentence." At home, I hung my coat, placed a flash drive back in its drawer, and sat down at the kitchen table. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The world returned to scale. By the next morning, the first official response arrived. An email from Claymont County Records confirming the correction of my status across all linked databases. Alive. Present. Verified. It felt strange to read it spelled out like that, as if breathing required documentation. Margaret followed up with a call. "The property freeze is holding. Bank's compliance department is involved now. They're not happy." "Good," I said. "They shouldn't be." That afternoon, a letter arrived from the engagement venue. Polite, apologetic, neutral. They had no position, they explained, but were obligated to suspend all activity pending resolution. They refunded part of the deposit. The rest was under review. I set the letter aside. It didn't matter. The house was quiet again. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th day, Daniel's name appeared on my phone. I let it ring. The second time I answered. "Why?" he asked immediately. No greeting. No apology. Just a question sharpened by fear. "Why what?" I asked. "Why did you do this publicly?" I took a breath. Not because I needed one, but because it deserved one. "I didn't," I said. "You did." Silence followed. Not confusion this time. Calculation. "You could have called," he said finally. "I was dead," I replied. "Remember?" He exhaled sharply. "You know that's not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant," I said. "You wanted it quiet. Clean. You wanted the house without the conversation. That's not fair." "It's accurate." His voice dropped. Rebecca didn't know everything. She knew enough to sign a letter saying I was gone. She trusted me. That's between the two of you. Another pause. Then, softer, "I needed a fresh start." "So, did I said. "That's why I stayed out of your way. Until you erased me." He didn't respond. There was nothing left to negotiate. The call ended without resolution. That, too, was resolution. Weeks passed. Paperwork moved. Slowly but decisively. The handwriting analysis came back conclusive. Not mine. The power of attorney was invalidated. The second lien was voided. The bank issued a formal apology, carefully worded and legally empty. Margaret forwarded everything with brief notes. Resolved. Closed. No contest filed. Daniel never challenged the findings. Silence, again as language. Rebecca sent a message once. Just once. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. I believed him. "I'm sorry." I read it. I believed her. Both things could be true. I didn't reply. Forgiveness doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it requires distance. Spring turned into summer. Hawthorne Ridge sat empty for a while. Then a for sale sign appeared. Margaret handled the transaction. Clean. Fast. No shared profits. No shared future. I didn't attend the closing. I didn't need to. The proceeds settled comfortably into an account I hadn't touched in years. Not because I didn't need the money, but because I didn't need the reminder. I moved apartments shortly after. Smaller. Brighter. Fewer echoes. A place that felt forward-facing. Neighbors didn't know my history. They didn't need to. I introduced myself simply. Arthur. Retired. Like strong coffee. Life recalibrated. Sometimes at night, memories surfaced. Not a confrontation, but of earlier years. Teaching Daniel to drive. Sitting in folding chairs at school events. The quiet pride of watching someone grow. Those memories weren't poisoned by what happened. They were contextualized, put in their proper place. One afternoon, I ran into Evan Hartley at a grocery store. He recognized me immediately. Awkward. Nervous. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I know," I replied. He hesitated. "He told people you passed years ago." I never questioned it. I should have. "You believed a story that made sense at the time," I said. "That's human." He nodded, relieved. "He's not doing great." "I'm not surprised." "Do you want to tell him anything?" I shook my head. No, that chapter didn't need a footnote. As months passed, the story faded. Not erased, resolved. People stopped whispering. The engagement was remembered as canceled, not exposed. Lies often retreat quietly when confronted with documentation. I joined a local book group. Started walking mornings again. Let routines rebuild themselves without resistance. One evening, while organizing old files, I came across the original photograph of Daniel and me by the lake. I considered throwing it out. I didn't. I placed it back in the drawer. Memory doesn't need to be displayed to exist. What surprised me most wasn't the relief. It was a clarity. Knowing exactly where I stood, legally and emotionally, freed up space I hadn't realized was occupied. I wasn't a ghost anymore. Not because someone acknowledged me, but because I refused to accept erasure. That distinction mattered. On the anniversary of the engagement, that never was. I woke early, brewed coffee, and sat by the window. Sunlight moved across the floor. Ordinary. Perfect. I opened my notebook and wrote. Being present is not loud. It is undeniable. The pen didn't hesitate. Neither did I. Time doesn't rush in after something ends. It waits. It watches to see what you'll do with the space it leaves behind. The weeks after the house sale passed without incident. No sudden letters. No legal surprises. No apologies disguised as explanations. The quiet held. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Margaret called once more, strictly professional. The last document had been filed. The case was officially closed. No pending actions. No residual exposure. Enjoy being legally alive, she said. I intend to, I replied. That should have been the end of it. In many ways, it was, but endings rarely arrive without aftershocks. They just come smaller, subtler, the kind that don't knock things down, but rearrange them when you're not looking. The first aftershock came in the form of a forwarded email. Margaret didn't add commentary. She didn't need to. It was a message Daniel had sent to the bank's compliance department after everything unraveled. An attempt to explain, to justify, to frame the lie as a misunderstanding that grew legs on its own. The words were careful, the tone defensive. Responsibility shifted sideways without ever landing anywhere solid. I read it once, then deleted it. The second came from a distant relative, someone who'd attended holidays years ago, back when family meant shared tables and overlapping conversations. The message asked if the rumors were true, if I was okay, if I wanted to talk. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, because I was finished explaining myself. What surprised me was how little anger remained. I had expected it to linger, to settle into the corners like dust. Instead, it evaporated. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness. It was precision. I knew exactly what I would accept moving forward, and what I wouldn't. That clarity reshapes a person. One afternoon, while walking to the farmer's market, I caught my reflection in a storefront window, not in a dramatic way, just a glance. Older, straighter, lighter somehow, as if weight I had known I carried had been set down without ceremony. I bought apples, bread, honey, normal things. Life resumed without asking permission. A month later, a letter arrived with unfamiliar handwriting. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, just a paragraph. It said Daniel was selling what remained of his furniture, that he and Rebecca had separated, that he was trying to understand how things went wrong. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't ask for contact. It simply stated facts, like a report written too late to change the outcome. I folded it carefully and placed it in the fireproof box with the rest of the documents. Not because it belonged there, but because it no longer belonged in my head. Some stories don't deserve a response. They deserve an ending. As summer deepened, I began volunteering at a local archive. Old maps, deeds, records, paper with memory embedded in it. I liked the quiet order of it. The way truth leaves trails if you know how to look. The irony wasn't lost on me. One morning, while sorting through a stack of yellow files, I found a deed from decades earlier. A property transferred under similar circumstances. A signature contested. A dispute resolved only after years of silence. I wondered how many people had been erased softly, without confrontation. How many had accepted it because challenging the lie felt heavier than living with it. That thought stayed with me, not as bitterness, as responsibility. Late one evening, I returned home to find a voicemail waiting. Unknown number. I almost deleted it without listening. Almost. It was Rebecca. Her voice was steadier than I expected. Not defensive. Not pleading. I don't expect a response, she said. I just wanted you to know the engagement didn't end because of the house. It ended because the lie didn't stop there. I didn't know who I was building a life with. A pause. Then, quieter. I'm sorry I participated in erasing you. The message ended. I sat with the phone in my hand, longer than necessary. Not because I was deciding whether to respond, Because I was acknowledging something rare. Accountability without demand. I didn't call back. I didn't text. But I didn't delete the message either. Closure doesn't always require dialogue. Sometimes it requires recognition. Autumn arrived gently. Leaves turning. Air sharpening. I rearranged my apartment. Donated old clothes. Framed a photograph of the lake. Not the one with Daniel. Another one. Taken years later. Just water and light. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found an envelope addressed in handwriting I knew well. Daniel. Inside, no explanations. No justifications. Just one sentence. I understand now that silence was never neutral. That was it. I read it twice, then placed it back in the envelope. No reply followed. That sentence told me more than an apology ever could. The holidays came and went quietly. No invitations. No obligations. I cooked for myself. Chose music I liked. Slept when I was tired. Woke when I was done sleeping. Peace, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in when no one is trying to rewrite your existence. One evening, while updating my notebook, I realized something had shifted again. I no longer felt the need to document. The urge to prove had faded. The truth had settled. It didn't need guarding anymore. I closed the notebook for the first time in months and placed it on the shelf. Not hidden, not displayed. Just there. Weeks later, I ran into Daniel by chance. A coffee shop, a line too short to avoid. He looked older, not aged, worn. He recognized me immediately. We stood there for a moment. Two people with a shared history and no shared script. I won't ask how you are, he said finally. That's wise, I replied. Another pause. I was wrong, he said. Not defensively, not dramatically. Just factual. I know, I said. He nodded once. Stepped aside. Let me order first. That was all. No reconciliation. No embrace. No closure packaged neatly. Just acknowledgement. As I walked home with my coffee cooling in my hand, I realized something important. The confrontation at the engagement hadn't been the climax of the story. It had been the correction. The real ending came after. In the quiet. In the choices that followed. I had been erased once, on paper, in public, with intention, and I had returned, not to punish, not to reclaim a role, but to establish a boundary that could not be crossed again. That boundary held. One night, as winter approached, I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on. I thought about how close I'd come to accepting disappearance, simply because challenging it felt inconvenient to others. I thought about how many people mistake endurance for weakness. Then I wrote one final line in the notebook before closing it for good. Presence is not granted. It is asserted. The pen clicked shut. The apartment was quiet. And for the first time in a long while, that quiet belonged entirely to me. The months that followed didn't bring surprises. That was the gift. Life settled into a shape that felt intentional rather than inherited. Mornings belonged to me. Afternoons stretched without expectation. Evenings arrived without carrying anyone else's disappointment. Hawthorne Ridge became just another address in the county records. No emotional pull. No bitterness. Just ink where ink belonged. Occasionally, someone would ask about Daniel. The question usually came wrapped in politeness, as if curiosity could soften history. I don't keep track, I'd say, and that was the truth. Not because I didn't care. Because caring no longer required proximity. I learned something important in the aftermath of being erased. Reconciliation is optional. Dignity is not. One afternoon, while reorganizing my files, I finally dismantled the old digital folder. The screenshots, affidavits, and scanned letters moved from active storage to archival. Still accessible. Still mine. But no longer heavy. Evidence had done its job. The flash drive labeled spice blends went into the back of a drawer, forgotten on purpose. At the community archive, a younger volunteer once asked why I like working with records so much. Paper remembers when people don't, I said. He laughed. Think it was a joke. It wasn't. The final update came quietly. A notification from the county confirming all linked databases reflected the correction permanently. No residual flags. No annotations. Alive. Verified. Closed. I printed it anyway and slipped it into a book I was reading. Not out of fear. Out of appreciation. There's power in seeing truth written plainly. On a cold morning near the end of winter, I took a walk past the old neighborhood where Daniel once lived. Not toward his place. Just through the streets. Memory without attachment. I didn't feel loss. I felt perspective. Family, I realized, isn't defined by who keeps your name. It's defined by who doesn't try to erase it. That night, I cooked dinner slowly. Ate without distraction. Let the quiet stretch. Before bed, I opened the notebook one last time. Flipped through pages filled with dates, notes, fragments of resolve. I stopped at the first page, where everything had begun. Then I turned to the last blank sheet and wrote. I was declared gone. I returned without asking permission. I closed the notebook and placed it back on the shelf. Not as a reminder, as a conclusion. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that presence matters even when others try to rewrite it, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about where you're watching from. It helps stories like this reach the people who need to hear them. Because sometimes showing up is a whole ending.